los niños juegan, cae la noche.
Hi everyone. Friends of mine know how focused I am on trying to answer one question. Under what conditions can we have a conversation with a fellow animal? You might laugh, but I'm inspired by Dr. Dolittle and believe the world would be a much better and kinder place if we could chat to a cow. An analogy I used was that of the Rosetta Stone and how it unlocked the hieroglyphics and therefore the secrets of ancient Egypt. The vision for what we're striving to seek out the conversation algorithm that will unlock in ourselves a greater sense of respect for those other animals with whom we share our planet. So we no longer just see them simply as objects and possessions. When I was growing up, I always wanted to be an inventor, to have the power to manifest imagination into reality. It'll be inventors who find this algorithm. My two proudest inventions are, as founder of Coller Capital, I'm now known almost 30 years later as the godfather of private equity secondaries. And there is FAIR, Farm Animal Investment Risk and Return. With over 38 trillion, it's become the fastest growing animal welfare investor network in the world. Today, we're calling for action for a new generation of inventors. And my words are now particularly focused on those of you minded to take up this challenge, to bridge the gap in our knowledge. Now is the moment to harness advances in the internet and artificial intelligence, which gives us at last the opportunity of unlocking the conversation algorithm that will enable us to speak with our fellow animals. Some will mock, the stupid do, so let's just ignore them. Instead, let's have a competition. Under what conditions can human inspiration and perspiration break through the barrier to unlock a universal translator? Hats off to Peter Gabriel, who was the genesis for Interspecies Internet. And everyone here has been brought together by his vision to bring the Interspecies Internet to life. Today, we're at the intersection of two revolutions, artificial intelligence and biotechnology. This could lead to a world where AI and robots will actively work and live and coexist amongst us. Bots have already developed the ability to speak with themselves in a way we humans can't understand. So what happens when they develop the ability to speak with other animals? What happens when one of Alibaba, Amazon, Facebook or Google owns that universal translator and can decipher their wants and needs, and we can't understand it? This isn't science fiction. This is the path we're on. Robots capable of making their own decisions will be part of our society. What happens when there is a voice for the voiceless? What will the pigs, chickens, cows and salmon say about us humans to these robots? Who will be defined as the virus and pest on the planet? We all know the answer. This is one chilling prediction of a potential future. Set against that background, the interspecies internet has highlighted the need for this wonderful community to ensure its data and research doesn't become extinct, which is why the Jeremy Coller Foundation has given the first interspecies internet grant to digitalize whale song. Roger Payne's groundbreaking field recordings that led to the 1972 UN conference which agreed a 10-year global moratorium on commercial whaling, particularly for young scientists to carry on the analysis with new AI technology, metaphorically enabling them to stand on the shoulders of the scientists who've gone before, creating a combined sense of purpose and shared ambition that we might build within our society respect and hopefully greater compassion between ourselves and other animals. With that, I'm delighted to introduce the 4 founders of this Interspecies Internet, Dr. Vince Cerf, Vice President and Chief Internet Evangelist for Google, co-designer of the TCP/IP protocols and the architecture of the Internet. Peter Gabriel, musician and founder of Interspecies Internet, and Dr. Neil Gershenfeld, professor at MIT and director of MIT's Center for Bits and Atoms. And finally, Dr. Diana Reese, a cognitive psychologist, marine mammal scientist, and professor and director of the Animal Behavior and Conservation Graduate Program at Hunter College, New York. Over to you. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's brilliant to have so many of you here with us today. It's been an extraordinary story, the Interspecies Internet or Interspecies IO. And for those of you that were with us yesterday, some of this introduction is going to be the same, so I apologize for the repetition, but we have a lot of new people with us, which is fantastic. What on earth is Interspecies IO, the Interspecies Internet? I'm sure if you ask each of us, you're going to get a very different answer. This is a meeting place for minds, but it's also a meeting place for dreams. We are a motley collection of scientists, philosophers, data scientists, artists, and animal lovers. We were all inspired by the amazing work of the pioneers of interspecies communication and their non-human partners, who we are recognizing in our Hall of Fame. And it's really an honor to have Irene Pepperberg, Penny Patterson, Sue Savage-Rumbaugh, and Roger Payne, amongst many others, here actually with us and on this mission to change the way the world sees and interacts with non-humans. We started with a very small number, but are now nearly 4,000 participants. We're hoping to build a movement. Many of the researchers have been exploring intra and interspecies communications and connections independently, but they've chosen, fortunately for us, to come and form a loose but passionate group of explorers and enthusiasts. Neil Gershenfeld yesterday talked about a snowball beginning to roll, and it really feels as if we're reaching the critical mass to make that happen. These are some of the things we're thinking about. We should explore and expand all the possibilities of interspecies communication with the specific intent of enabling non-human minds to access the internet. That is, when they themselves choose to explore it. We want to encourage the design and creation of new, better, and more intuitive interfaces. We want to look at all the clues and patterns in non-human communication that might suggest the foundations of language using the power of AI and machine learning. And if you can, check out the Earth Species Project, about which you're going to learn a lot more later. It's amazing. We want to acknowledge, protect, and publicize the remarkable work of all the pioneers in this field. This is our Hall of Fame. And we want to gather all the relevant information and data and put it in one place and build a powerful and open archive. And thanks especially for the amazing contribution Mark Graham has made. We also have to sit down and listen to Indigenous peoples, many of whom would find the idea of starting interspecies communication ridiculous because their cultures have been doing it for thousands of years. They have so much to teach us. As Tomas Saraceno pointed out yesterday, it's not just Indigenous peoples, but those who spend a lot of time with non-humans who've learned to recognize and understand many of their signals and communications. We want this to be an open science project. Open meaning open and accessible to all. open to all ideas, regardless of how much they conflict with current expert thought. We want this movement to have enough momentum and mass to provide some nurturing shelter for any wild and crazy ideas that need a safe environment to develop. It's true, there's a basic human anthropomorphic tendency, desire, that we want all other species to think and communicate just like us, the Dr. Dolittle dream. But we know that they communicate in very different ways to us, and sometimes with different senses and frequency ranges. Translation is not an easy task. But it's also very clear we've been blind to the obvious clues that non-humans have given us, that we've grossly underestimated their cognitive and communicative abilities. Oliver Sacks, who through his books introduced me to so many fascinating ideas and facts, was working on a book on this subject when we sadly lost him. But this is an extract of an encounter with an orangutan in Toronto Zoo. Her bright little eyes flicked about, observing my nose, my chin, all the human but also apish features of my face, identifying me as one of her own, or at least closely akin. Then she stared into my eyes and I into hers, like lovers gazing into each other's eyes, with just the pane of glass between us. I put my left hand against the window, and she immediately put her right hand over mine. Their affinity was obvious. We could both see how similar they were. I found this astounding, wonderful. It gave me an intense feeling of kinship and closeness, but I had never had before with any animal. So the agenda is to explore that kinship that we know and love so well with our pets, to explore and expand all the related science so we learn how to facilitate much better communication between all species. Every day, we have more reports of fires and floods. It's obvious that we need immediately to take on the stewardship of the planet that gave birth to us in a very different way. This project should be part of a movement that enables us to reconnect with and respect the magnificent world of nature, so the world we leave behind is not a sick, selfish, and dying place, but a healthy, thriving, and respectful home for all of our kids and grandkids, and all the sentient beings that are our fellow passengers on this spaceship Earth. I'm now going to hand over to a man who made a lot of this possible, because he's one of the co-creators of the internet, known as the godfather of the internet, Mr. Bincer.
Well, good day, everyone, and thank you so much, Peter. I must tell you that I am reminded once again that I should never follow Peter Gabriel. His language and expression is just so compelling and so comprehensive. But let me tell you a little bit about why I'm so excited about this project. The internet has grown over the years to become a global platform filled with a massive amount of computing and data storage capacity, huge assets that can be helpful not only to the researchers who need these resources in order to analyze their data, but also who will make use of these systems in order to permit non-human creatures to access the internet and communicate through it. That at least is our hope. My view as a kind of infrastructure guy is that the internet will aid the researchers in their quest for that Rosetta Stone that Jeremy mentioned. We expect to see more advances in machine learning tools and ability to process very, very large data sets containing all the information
Have you ever wondered what that means?
Non-human and human species in order to analyze that and to find a way to translate, if possible, the expressions that these non-human species are capable of. It's important to remember that intelligence is an evolutionary asset. And it's very clear to those of us who've been exposed to the research, as we did yesterday in our workshop, that there is real cognitive capacity in non-human species. And our job here is to unlock it, take advantage of it, and provide a capacity to those non-human species. One of the most important researchers in this space is Diana Reese, whom I'd like to introduce now. Diana, the floor is yours.
Hi, Vince. I think we're going with Neil next. Neil?
That's fine.
Do you want to pass and then I'll go left?
You're quite right. I looked at the wrong schedule. I apologize. Neil, you're the infrastructure guy and you're on.
That's fine. We had the flipped order yesterday. Well, it's a pleasure to be joining you. This collaboration, it's been a joy to help with the project's plumbing. It grew really just from an accidental TED Talk, a one-off MIT meeting, into the snowball Peter mentioned. And it's been eye-opening how the Internet of People and the Internet of Things that have gotten so much attention missed much of the planet's biomass. And beyond sustainability and just the pleasure of the project, it's really raising profound questions about consciousness and understanding. So last year's now annual meeting posed some challenges, and we've done pretty well on them. One was to create a collaborating community, and it's led to creating the Interspecies IO site. And everything we do today, where you want to know follow-up of where to find archives and data and videos, the starting point is Interspecies IO. It's led to a regular talk series, a busy Slack group Mark Graham and colleagues have created, really building this collaborating community of hundreds to thousands of people. And then another challenge last year was creating the organizational infrastructure to support this growth. And so Will Davis and colleagues have done a great job creating nonprofit organizations in the US and UK for that infrastructure. So that's good progress for the year. Now looking ahead, we had a fabulous workshop day yesterday. I really encourage seeing the videos from that. And in the discussion afterward, among the challenges, one was creating a platform to map all of these people and projects. And another was creating infrastructure to share all the hardware and software tools being developed for the project. Those are ambitious goals, and I look forward to watching over the coming year and reporting at next year's event, hopefully the same sort of progress against them. And so with that, now then I'm delighted to hand off to my colleague, Diana Reese.
Thank you, Neil. Well, hi, everyone. And I'd like to welcome all of you back with us who joined us in our last year's public conference, Conversations Conference, and welcome all of the new folks with us today who are joining us again for the first time. I think I can probably say with great confidence that most of you share our dream in communicating and finding ways of communicating with other animals, or you have interests in learning about how other animals communicate amongst themselves, intra-specifically. And again, the goals of our forum that, as Peter discussed, are to advance the projects that are decoding the various ways, the myriad of ways that other species communicate amongst themselves intraspecifically. Just imagine if we had a Google translator for other animals, the way we can translate our own languages. It would be amazing. So that's a dream that we sort of hold out there. And there are people there are scientists who are working on these kinds of projects now, using new technology and human power of observation and our human power of listening to the other species around us. We're also interested, as Peter said, in developing new interfaces for interspecies exchanges and communication. And this is not a new idea. Many studies have been done already, teaching forms of American Sign Language to apes, to giving apes computer interfaces, to teaching African gray parrots functional communication using human languages. My own work involves developing interfaces with dolphins. We started with a keyboard many years ago, and the dolphins partnered with us in showing us many of their capabilities that had been invisible to us beforehand. And now we've created a large 4x8 D-pad, we're calling it. It's a dolphin touchscreen to accelerate these approaches in communication. But overall, we also want to find ways of providing animals increased degrees of choice and control, finding ways to give them a voice, to hear their voices so they can be part of the conversations with us. I just want to mention some new things that have been going on in the Interspecies internet since we met last year. In the past year, starting in the spring, we created a new monthly Interspecies online conversations lecture series, and we had 2 lectures. We've had 2 lectures so far. This is a lecture series that all of you can join. Look at our website, and the lectures will be posted. It's simple to sign up for them. Our first speaker in the spring was William Lynn, who's a thought leader in animal and sustainability ethics, and he's with George Perkins Marsh Institute at Clark University. He gave a wonderful talk and a primer for all of us on ethics. Our second speaker was Ofer Chernikovsky, who's a professor at Hunter College, who gave a lecture on birdsong development. Now, birdsong development has been a heavily studied field, but Ofer presented new breakthrough research he did with his colleagues on how zebra finches learn song, the dynamics, and some really interesting aspects of imitation that had been unknown previously. And that paper was recently published in Nature Communications. Both talks are now published on our website, and future lectures will be announced as we develop them. So please check out that website on our Interspecies internet postings. Another of our Interspecies internet initiatives that Peter already alluded to is the creation of a Hall of Fame to recognize and honor the accomplishments of scientists who've done pioneering work in this area of research. But we also want to recognize their non-human partners, the other species that have partnered with them on these adventures, on these discoveries. This is terribly important. Again, and they are partners and collaborators in every sense of the word. We're very excited to announce that the Nobel laureate photographer, Peter Badge, will be doing the photographs. And this, hopefully, we hope this will serve to stimulate future generations in this quest. And we see this effort as a way of increasing worldwide and greater respect and empathy for animals. We're extremely dedicated to doing what we call translational research. What this means is we do research for basic research. Many of us are scientists, we have philosophers, we have artists, musicians, but we do our research to learn about the natural world around us. But the idea of translational research is often attached to biomedical discoveries. But we can also do translational research, translating what we're learning about animal minds into policy and how we can affect our global awareness of the animals we share this planet with. Again, trying to find better ways of protecting them. So today we have 4 sessions of talks. The first section, which I'll be moderating, will be focusing on various research projects. Then we'll have a session on technology that Neil Gershenfeld will moderate, followed by a session on arts, science, and culture that Peter will moderate, and a final session, a celebration of whales, that Vin will moderate. During each of these sessions, we ask that you please hold your questions until all the speakers are done talking. And then we'll have a Q&A period, a question and answer period after each of those sessions. Finally, at the very end of the program, Dr. Roger Payne, who discovered humpback whale song with his colleagues, will present a keynote address followed by Q&A. From us. So again, welcome to this conference, and I will kick off our first session entitled Research. So in this session, we're going to be focusing on interspecies communication. That means, again, communication between different species and intraspecies communication, communication between members of the same species. We'll have 3 talks in this session. I'll introduce all the speakers now just to save time later, but their full bio sketches are available on our website as well. So do please check them out. After all the talks are presented, as I said, we'll have a 10-minute Q&A, and you can post your questions in the chat for us. We're not going to be seeing any of your hands, so please post any questions in the chat. Well, the first talk today, entitled Project CETI, Decoding the Language of Whales, will be given by 2 speakers. David Gruber is one who's a presidential professor of biology and environmental science at Baruch College. That's part of the City University of New York. And David also serves on the faculty of the PhD program in biology at the CUNY Graduate Center. And he's a CUNY Macaulay Honors College faculty member as well. And the other speaker will be Pratyusha Sharma, who's a PhD student in the Electrical Engineering and Computer Science Department at MIT. Our second talk, entitled A Sweet Deal, How Humans Cooperate with Wild Birds to Find Honey, will be presented by Jessica van der Waal, a postdoctoral fellow at the Fitzpatrick Institute of African Ornithology at the University of Cape Town. And our third talk, Cowmunication, Decoding Cow Vocalisations and Applications for On-Farm Welfare Assessment, will be presented by Alexandra Green. Alexandra is a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Sydney. She recently finished her PhD studying cattle vocal communication and explored the information content of dairy cow vocalizations. Alexandra is an advocate for good animal welfare practices as well. So today we're going to start with our first talk by David Gruber and Pratyusha. David, it's all yours.
Hi, thank you so much. Can you hear me? Good.
Yes,
yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Well, first to thank you and Dana and all the organizers of the Interspecies Internet. It's such a wonderful community that you brought together, and it's a community that's here to try to connect. We're trying to connect to ourselves, and we're trying to connect to other species, and we really stand on the shoulders of so many scientists like yourself that have spent your careers kind of building up the tools and techniques in which we can look at animals. And it's so cool to just think of the human history of our connection in the planet and how we've connected. I'm going to share a little bit about an ambitious project that we're on called Project CETI. And of course, we're building on the search for extraterrestrial intelligence and really standing on their shoulders. So this is the Cetacean Translation Initiative, and we're really happy to form this transdisciplinary initiative that recently got the TED Audacious. But this is a 5-year program that we're just embarking on, and it's taking us about 1.5 years just to kind of get all the tools and preparation ready for this. We chose sperm whales for not because they're our favorite animal, well, there's maybe some people on the team they are, but we chose them for a suite of technical reasons on why we thought they might be a good test subject for animal communication, and also because their narrative that they have with humans. This is Moby Dick, and there used to be millions of these, and there's now only around 300,000 remaining. So we live in a world where there's still these magical creatures that are the size of a school bus that dive 1 mile deep, and we want to know more about them. We're building on the shoulders of other researchers. Roger Payne is one of our core advisors, and Hal Whitehead, who also trained Shane Garrow, who have been working for 16 years in Dominica with, you might see his work in The Secrets of the Whales that just came out with Disney and Nat Geo to get a beautiful narrative of his work. And has been working really tirelessly, as all the researchers have, in dropping microphones in the water and using D-tags to collect this information. What we're planning to do is really just collate around the different areas, robotics, machine learning, linguistics, and pull this all together. And Pratyusha is going to share much more of this, so I'm not going to go into key detail, But our key piece of data collection are going to be these three, we're calling them our core whale listening system buoys, which when we turn on next summer, will generate large data sets that will be comparable to other machine learning models. Pratyusha will cover more on this, but if you go online, and we'll also post this link, you could see our roadmap on the open source archive, which kind of tells, at least now, where we're thinking at this moment, looking at previous efforts, what are some of the key, as you climb a mountain, you might put up little roadmaps or beacons or lights along the way, but this will likely change, but this is just our thinking at the moment, and we'd love any kind of feedback. And just to end before I pass off to Pratyusha, this is about connecting to other animals, but it's also about creating empathy and how we do anything. And as we approach Dominica, we're so happy to have formed a separate nonprofit in Dominica where we'll be donating all our equipment at the end. And our real goal here is to think of capacity building and to instill this knowledge and the STEM that we'll be bringing to Dominica. And so we're pleased to, as of next week, we'll be launching our Whale Advocacy Education and Empowerment Program, which looks at female education. But with that, I want to pass off to Pratyusha, who is a PhD student at MIT's Computer Science Artificial Intelligence Laboratory. Pratyusha.
Thank you, David. Thanks a lot for the introduction. So I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. So hello, everyone. It's really great to be at the conference and really learn from all the pioneers in the field. I'm Pratyusha, and I'm a second-year PhD student at the CCA lab at MIT. And today I'm going to be talking about Project CETI and our roadmap to deciphering the communication of whales. So this is a very big project, and here's a picture of the Project CETI team. And I'm very lucky to be working with all the incredible people on this team. So what you're about to hear are the sounds of a sperm whale, an animal with the largest known brain to have ever existed on the planet. Sperm whales have rich social lives. They live in pods or groups in amazingly complex matriarchal societies. They do several activities together, coordinate their dives, socialize in groups, and have even been seen to babysit the young ones of the other. These behaviors are fairly complex and require the whales to be able to model the other individual's mind to a significant degree. They have a neocortex and spindle cells, structures that in humans control our higher thoughts, emotions, memory, language, and love. Further, they live in a world full of sounds where light is limited and sound travels 4 times faster. Underwater, sound is a major mode of sensing and perception. Sperm whales not only use sound to communicate, but also to echolocate. But communication clicks come in very distinct types of groups called coders, and these clicks are non-directional clicks and typically generated by the whale in the presence of other whales. It's fascinating to think about what is the role of communication in the lives of animals, and more specifically, what is the complexity of their communication. While communication can be both verbal and non-verbal, communication via sound or a set of symbols or gestures tells us about the ability of an organism to consolidate their sensory experience into a symbol to effectively coordinate and communicate. It also tells us about the ability of an organism to compose and structure complex responses and is a major sign of intelligence. But to really understand the complexity of communication and the presence of language, we would like to break down this question into studying and looking for the following different characteristics of language, such as discreteness, grammar, the presence of long-range dependencies, productivity, which is the ability to use language to create an infinite number of messages from a finite set of symbols and a grammar, and displacement, which is the ability to talk about things that are not directly in front of you. While several of these fascinating characteristics are exhibited by animals to varying degrees, no animal other than human have them all. Until now, only humans seem to have a complex enough language structure They're used for complex communication, cognition, and to pass and accumulate knowledge. So do animals really have all of these different characteristics of a language, or to what extent are their calls complex? And what is the meaning of their calls? So while studying animals in captivity can teach us about the amazing ability of animals to learn new things, new skills, studying these animals in the wild will help us study the question of what are the existent communication protocols that have come to evolve and exist in the wild. So the main question then is to give, if we're given a collection of unstructured sounds and behavior from a species living in a very specific environment, can we discover these units, rules, and the meaning of these units and try to communicate back? So this is a very interesting and challenging question, but it contains of there are two main challenges. The first is that this would require us to translate from a set of vocalizations and behaviors to a language we know without any existent speaker of both the languages. And second, this would require us to translate between languages spoken in very different worlds. And hopefully the study and algorithms that we develop can be cross-applied to other animals, to secluded tribal groups, to aliens, and to the messages of the different cells in the brain, because they can also be thought of as messages from one agent neuron to another agent neuron. And interestingly, the only known machine algorithm or person that can speak or figure out a language in a completely different world is a baby. A very important question to ask is, scientists have tried to learn the language of animals since a very long time. And why is the present time, or in today's world, why is this a good time to maybe try again or continue to keep trying? And the reasons are the following two. So the first is data. So the progress made in all the different fields over several years has really enabled the possibility to collect, process, and learn from large-scale and multimodal data. And the possibility of assembling large and interdisciplinary teams to work together across fields like robotics, biology, linguistics, computer science, etc. But if we were to look in retrospective on the evolution of human language analysis by computers, we can see that early approaches heavily relied on a priori assumption about language. For example, in the form of handcrafted rules of grammatical structure. This limited the scope of application of NLP to known languages and required a lot of human-guided processing and annotation. And this obviously precluded this application in settings where language was new or unknown, like in our case. So what happened in the field more recently is a shift from handcrafted rules to statistical and machine learning techniques that can extract the structure and rules from examples of text. And this is also true in the study of perception and interaction or robotics. It has really been made possible because of three things. One, improved computing power. Second, algorithmic and architectural developments. And third, and most importantly, large-scale multimodal data. So how large a data set do we really need to train modern language models? So just to give you an idea of the order of magnitude, BERT, a model from 2018, used the data set collected from English Wikipedia containing about 2.5 billion words. GPT-2, a model developed by OpenAI, used 10 billion words, and a new version of the model released last year used 500 billion words. So for comparison, the Dominica Sperm Whale project, collected by Professor Shane Giro and his team over the last 15 years, has about 100K annotated clicks, which is orders of magnitude lesser. So with the next few years, we're talking about collecting a qualitatively larger data set, which will hopefully help us really dive deep into this field. Another interesting insight has been the following. Until very recently, translating between languages required parallelly mapped data from one language to another. In a series of papers in 2018, Lampel et al. Showed that it's possible to completely unsupervised translate by geometrically aligning independently trained word phrase embeddings from two different languages in high dimensional space, producing automatic correspondence between words or translation of some sort. So the performance those drops as the content of the language becomes dissimilar, or if the world of the speakers of the two languages diverge. This brings us to why it is important for us to not only collect a large-scale data set of audio, but also all the other different modalities, which will help us capture different aspects of context in which the different sounds were made and allow us to study how sounds behavior, and actions tie together. Despite even really rich perception and sensing, there will still be things that cannot be observed. Example, interactions of contact, which will make the setting partially observable, but with increased amounts of data and context to go with, we will have more to go with. So how would this happen? The approach would comprise of the following key steps. First, we would record and collect large-scale longitudinal multimodal data set of whale communication and behavioral data from a variety of sensors, including tags, buoys, drones, swimming robots, and robotic fish. Then we process and reconcile the multi-sensor data, which would involve steps of tracking, IDing the different whale sounds, separating the sources of sounds. Followed by that, we will decode using machine learning techniques, create a model of whale communication and characterize its structure and link it to behavior. Finally, we will conduct interactive playback experiments to both refine and evaluate the whale language model. Another interesting focus of the project will be to collect whale calf-mother interaction to help us understand and study the process of acquisition in baby whales and how it may be similar or different to from humans. More details about the project can be found in the archive paper. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pratyusha and David, and for a fascinating talk. And we'll look forward to getting updates in the future. Just really fascinating. Our third and last speaker of this session, it will be, Alexandra Green, who's going to talk to us about Cowmunication. It's all yours, Alexandra.
Have you ever wondered what that means? Or maybe that? Many of us associate mooing with cattle, but what are they actually trying to tell us? Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Alexandra Green, and I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Sydney. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about some of my previous PhD research on Cowmunication, where we've decoded cow vocalisations and looked at applications for on-farm welfare assessment. Now, to start off, we need a little bit of a background as to why this research is so important. So what we're seeing is that the dairy industry is experiencing profound intensification, and worldwide consumption of dairy products is set to rise. But what we know is that there are many welfare issues associated with each stage of the cow's life cycle, from their individual housing as calves at young, to painful husbandry procedures, to production-related diseases, the premature separation of cow and calf, and the overall reduced longevity of cows compared to their wild counterparts. Now, there are increasing negative associations with large-scale farming operations, and consumers nowadays are becoming more aware of the origins of their food, and they're also wanting to know that the food is being produced at a high welfare standard. On farms, what we're seeing is that herd sizes are increasing and individual animal attention is decreasing. So our role as researchers is to develop novel ways to assess the welfare state of animals at the individual animal level. So this leads me to the aims of my research, which was to investigate the stable and dynamic information content of Holstein Friesian cow vocalizations, as well as the behaviors associated with vocal production. Now, to do this, I was recording 2 separate cow farms and 2 individual herds. So the first was in a free-ranging farming context with 18 Holstein Friesian heifers, so ones that are yet to give birth to a calf. We recorded them during estrus, so when they're eligible for mating and looking for a bull, when they were isolated from their herd mates. So given that they are a social species, this can be quite a stressful time for them, as well as when they were anticipating a tasty food reward, and then when they were really frustrated and they couldn't access the food reward anymore. So this was an experimental setup where we subjected the cows to these states. But then I moved on to a commercial farm and I observed cows in a range of different farming contexts which were likely to occur in this farm setup. So these included parturition, so when they were giving birth to the calf, when they were bonding with the calf, and then upon subsequent calf separation. Now, it is industry common practice for a cow and calf to be separated quite early on, and we do know that this is a very stressful time for them. So we wanted to see the vocal changes that occurred during this time. We recorded all the cows with a shotgun microphone and a video recorder so we could link up the vocalizations and the behaviors together. So the reason we're able to learn so much about the welfare state of cows through their vocalizations is because, just like humans, cows are mammals. And when a mammal is exposed to a stressor, this activates their sympathetic nervous system, so that fight or flight response, which then leads to changes in respiration, so how fast they're breathing, their salivation, and then the muscles involved in vocal production. This then leads to audible changes in their vocal features, which we can characterize to then make inferences about their welfare state. So we analyzed the vocalizations using an acoustic program called PRAT, which is common for human bioacoustic studies. We were able to visualize the vocalizations with this waveform up the top here and the spectrogram down the bottom. And we looked at a range of different vocal characteristics. As I mentioned previously, we worked in the commercial farming environment, which is not always compatible with high quality sound recordings. So we wanted to ensure that we were measuring really robust vocal features. So these included things such as the call duration, the pitch of the vocalization, and these things called nonlinear phenomena, which are these acoustic irregularities in their voice, and they seem to be quite prominent in the cow vocalizations. So now for the results. So the first result was that cows have individually distinct voices. So this relates back to the stable information content of their voice. So what we've shown is not only do they have this individual distinctiveness, but they're able to maintain this individuality of their voice across a range of different positive and negative farming contexts. So why this is so interesting is that previous studies on individuality have often shown individual differences without considering the within individual fluctuations that may occur in the voice when you are speaking in a different context. But we've shown that the vocal individuality can support individual recognition of cows across different contexts. And this parallels findings in human research, which is quite exciting. So I'll just play some calls for you now so you can hear how individually distinct they sound. So yeah, so basically if a cow was to vocalize in anticipation of a feed reward, that same cow could then be identified when she was vocalizing, say, in isolation from her herd mates. Now for the next findings, we also found that there were contextual related differences in the organization of the cow's behaviors, as well as in their vocal characteristics. So I'll go context by context and just characterize what it sounded like. So during calf interactions, when they were expressing this maternal behavior, they were licking the calf and really bonding with the calf, they tended to produce these nasalized vocalizations, so closed mouth calls. They were quite short in duration, and the time between calls was quite long. So they sounded something like this. As they began to get more stressed during calf separation, this is where they began to open up their mouth and produce these mixed mouth calls with both closed and open mouth parts, so just like here. These calls tended to be higher in pitch and a lot more variable, and they were tended to be produced in sequences as well. So I'll just play a call for you now. So that was a mixed call. When they were giving birth, they tended to produce calls that were really long in duration. They seemed really harsh sounding, and they were of a lower pitch, and they sounded something like this. For the behaviors that accompanied vocalizations, a really interesting finding was that exclusive to parturition, the cows tended to curl their tongue when they were vocalizing. So we thought this would be a really cool visual indicator to accompany the vocal changes that occurred during this context. In terms of the way they've laid out their calls, during calf separation, they tended to produce calls in a sequence, and they sounded something like this. And this was often accompanied with pacing back and forth and looking at the calf. So taking all of this information together, what it means is that we think that the cows produce these calls on a graded continuum based on their need for short and long distance communication, as well as their overall emotional state. So we showed that contextual information was encoded in a range of different acoustic features, as well as the way they lay out their vocalizations. So in a more positive, low stress environment, they tend to produce these closed mouth nasalized calls, which are a lot softer sounding, a lot more song-like, and they're shorter in duration. And as the situation becomes more stressful, this is where they begin to open up their mouth and produce these higher pitch, rougher, louder sounding vocalizations. So why is this information so important, and how can it help the cows? Well, what we've shown is that there is potential to non-invasively observe cattle through their vocalizations through a range of different acoustic features, and we can do this through both visual and oral means. So the vocal measures that we used were relatively robust and could be captured in the commercial farming environment, which is promising and suggests that this could be applied to other farms. More than that, it gets people thinking about the animals that produce their food. They may not have realized that the cows have such a complex vocal repertoire. And so it really gets people thinking about the animals that are producing their food. Additionally, we hope that this research may encourage farmers to make more informed welfare-related management decisions by essentially what the cows are telling them to. So yeah, overall, we show that this is a non-invasive measure of their welfare state, and we do hope that it can be used to improve their welfare on farm. So I'll save all questions to the end, but thank you very much for listening, and here are my contact details if you'd like to be in touch.
Alexandra, thank you for such a wonderful talk. Again, this is a wonderful example of how we can hear the voices of other animals and perhaps use them as indicators for welfare. I mean, this is a terribly important area of research, and this is a very exciting decoding project for us all to hear about. Thank you so much for your presentation today. So with that, I'd like to ask our three speakers to all join us and be online so we can see and hear you. And then we're opening this up for a Q&A, a question and answer period from our audience. So again, I just want to remind everybody to please write your questions in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many of them as possible. So let's see. So I have a question here from Brooke asking, how can we encourage more collaboration with people in the field who live and work with animals? Would any of you like to answer that question?
I think I would, if that's okay.
Absolutely, Jessica.
Yeah, I think it's a really important question. I think for our work, it is essential, and our work would not be possible without close collaboration with honey hunters. And I think we need to move away in general in anthropology and in ecology from what is called helicopter research, and we need to really make sure that local researchers are involved or are leading the research in the countries that we study our systems. So I would say this is one of the most important focuses that we need to focus on, especially now in COVID time, where we cannot visit all the countries that we normally do our research in.
Thank you. We have another question I'm going to direct to David and Pratyusha. The question is, how big is the project, Seti team, and are you looking for collaborators within robotics, coding, and data processing?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. The team is probably about 15 to 20 people now, And we are looking for collaborators in coding, robotics, data processing. We're working on setting up the open source community. And we've already partnered with Amazon Web Service Open Data. So all the data will be available there. And the data will turn on next summer. So we're working on even looking at other models and working with the community to develop an interface that people could come in, and if you want to work on a 1-day project, a 1-week project, a 1-month project, do you want to devote your life to this project? You know, we'll try to have different projects to suit different needs.
Thank you. Another question, are particular breeds of cows more vocal than others? Alexandra, it's your question.
Really good question. Sorry, hopefully you can hear me. Yes, I've only worked with the Holstein Friesian cows, so they're your black and white dairy cows that are well known. So I actually don't know the differences in their voice based on their breeds, but there definitely would be some just based on the fact that they are different sizes and shapes and things like that. But yeah, I actually haven't quantified that myself.
Thank you. This will be a question for Jessica. How did the honey hunter mutualism evolve? What do the birds do without humans?
Thanks. Again, a great question. Something we love to think about. Obviously, we don't know how it evolved. We think it is plausibly very old, ancient actually. Honeybees have been in Africa for 2 million years, I believe. It does depend on hominids having discovered fire, probably. So we think it's a very old, potentially very old mutualism. What did birds do before? There are other ways that honey guides can get wax. For example, when a honey badger raids a bee's nest. So there are ways of kind of scavenging on wax. Actually, one of the earliest anecdotes, I think from the 1500s, is from a Portuguese missionary in Mozambique who describes a little bird flying through the cracks of his church to nibble on the wax in his church. So yeah, we probably think that either the honey guide followed around a honey hunter, or it could also be the other way around. So there are different pathways that it could have led to this mutualism. Thank you for the question.
I don't see any other questions so far. I'm encouraging our audience to put some in. I have a couple that I'll pop out myself. I want to ask David and Pratyusha about, you were talking about meaning, and that's obviously really challenging to figure out how the meaning of communication of signals with other animals. Can you talk a little bit about that? How are you thinking about discovering meaning in the communication of the whales? You spoke a little bit about that with looking at behavior and sound, but can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yes, sure. Thank you. I think that's a great question. So I think one way to kind of figure out the meaning really is if we have multimodal streams of data, then what we speak about is a function of what we see or what we may be thinking about. So I guess we would try to get at it maybe from the two different sides, like one trying to look at like if two different streams of data always co-occur together, they're probably linked. So if like, for example, if this event A and the animal made a sound like at the same time, and this happens enough number of times and it's statistically significant, then the word probably relates to that experience. But if there are words like, for example, which do not have a physical sensory manifestation, such as gone, or which does not directly reflect things that we can see, those kind of words will be harder to ground directly from experience by themselves. But we might need to, like, I guess we would probably start with words that directly ground to sensory experiences and then try to figure out the meaning of words which may be more abstract.
Thank you. David, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think Pratyusha really hits it right. We're really relying on context. which is the importance here. It's and that's why we're spending so much time in developing the pipeline of data. Having worked on previous modeling projects, a lot of times you're just given data and you're trying to interpret it and looking for patterns among it. But we're specifically making this data set so it's amenable to natural language processing, so we can look at it under multi-dimensional analysis and essentially just try to teach the computer to learn a language like the way a baby would learn it. So I think the context is the key thing. Whenever we're chatting with the linguists, they're always like, if we don't have context information on all these interesting things, it's going to be harder to establish meaning.
Well, we have a lot to look forward to with all these projects. And this has been a fascinating session. I thank all of our speakers, and we are out of time. I thank the audience for their excellent questions as well. So it's break time. And I'd like to have everybody should be back at 10:27 for our next technical session, session on technology. 10:27 is our start time. See you all soon.